On today's episode.
So you do the initial recording and you get some information put in there. But what happens, I'll say 15 years down the road, when little Charlie is asking questions of Grandma that are about things that Grandma never would have had any opinion on? And so suddenly the AI has to manufacture all of this stuff. And what's the basis on which it's going to manufacture that? And you could end up with a Grandma that is completely opposite to the real Grandma who is no longer, alive. And he has a relationship with, not just with a ghost, but with a false ghost. Welcome to the Life Challenges podcast from Christian Life Resources. Our world today presents people with complicated issues of life and death, marriage and family, health and science. It can be a struggle to understand or deal with them. We're here to help by bringing good information and a fresh biblical perspective to these matters and more. Join us now for Life Challenges.
Hi, and welcome back. I'm Krista Potratz, and I'm here today with Pastors Bob Fleischman and Jeff Samuelson. And we welcome you to the new year, January 2026 here, and our current events. We are recording this in mid-December, so maybe some other current events and things have come up, but we do have a few to hit for today. So we're going to start with an article that Jeff had found. It's called "What's Killing Marriage? Unmarriageable Men or Liberal Women?" Catchy title.
It definitely gets your attention, but it's I'll a bit of a spoiler alert. It doesn't really answer one or the other. It's more of a both and kind of situation. But it's there's a lot of other reporting on this. There's a new poll from the Pew Foundation or company showing that in the past 30 years, the share of 12th grade girls who say they are most likely to choose to get married one day has dropped more than 20 percentage points, from 83% in 1993 to 61% in 2023. Meanwhile, the share of young men who hope to get married has remained steady at around 75%. And so that's a pretty significant change. And it's something that I think most of us, if we kind of just look around at what we see in, society and in the people we know and everything like that, we say, well, yeah, that kind of fits with what we're seeing. There's another poll mentioned, the Survey Center on American Life, that a majority of single women, so 55%, think that single women are happier than married women. And the article points out they're really not. Whereas a majority, 68% of single men take the opposite view, that being married is the happier state than being single. And so there's just a lot of interesting stuff going on there, just trying to figure out, okay, how much of a problem is this, if it is a problem, and what's behind it, so that if it is a problem, we know what to do about it. And there's a lot of interesting stuff there.
I found it interesting, like you said, it didn't answer the question, either question. Mm-hmm. And the problem is where do people form their values? How do they form the values? Which is really at the heart of it. Mm-hmm. And like, for example, the article did say one thing that was overlooked was big tech, how technology was really not directly addressed. They did talk a little bit about pornography in men and so forth. But the question that I think people have to wrestle with is, when you determine that you really embrace something, like you really embrace marriage or you really don't embrace marriage, what's behind it? What created that feeling in you? Now, a lot of times, just on an anecdotal level, the people that I talk to will say things like, my parents fought endlessly and it was a horrible divorce and I don't want to go through that. And you get that a lot. Now, 25 years ago, we built our home next door to my mom and dad. We built our homes at the same time. And it's amazing how many times I encountered people who say, I could never have my parents live next door to us, because, well, again, that's anecdotal. It's how it is. But what prompted us to do something like that was more from a biblical standpoint. It's a responsibility to care for others. When people have decided that they don't want to get married or they don't want to have children, I encountered, there was a strain in my ministry here at CLR where I was encountering people who would never want more than one child because they didn't want to do that to the planet. And of course, what influenced that? And I'm going to be like the article. I'm not going to answer that question right now, other than to say that I think it's an important question to ask is if you walk around with that conviction, like either marriage is the greatest thing or marriage is the worst thing and so forth, what drives it? And I do find interesting in the article that you shared is why the disparity between men and women. I found that was the most thought-provoking part for me.
One of the frustrating things about studies like this and their conclusions is, your initial reaction is like, how could this have happened? Somebody should have warned us and done something a long time ago, because obviously it's been going on for a long time. The thing is, the warnings were out there. I think it was roughly around 2003. Christina Hoff Sommers wrote a book called The War on Boys. And it was basically talking about how the entire education system and much of the culture had shifted in the United States so that basically all the things that made boys different, in terms of their activity level, what they were interested in, was being programmed out of them in schools and educational philosophy or whatever, and basically trying to make them girls who would sit quietly and who were all about social interaction and things like that. And, to her point, from what I understand, this woman didn't have a strong conservative agenda or anything like that. Just saying this is not good. It's not good for the boys. It's also not good for society. And there have been many people since then who have made similar points. And that's part of the thing that we're seeing here. It's not good for boys or the men they become if boys aren't turned into men.
Mm-hmm.
And so much of this, like getting into pornography, getting into video games and things like this, it's forestalling becoming men. It's like you're getting manhood in a certain way, but not the complete way, which of course makes those men then much less attractive to women who might want to get married, and women who may be on the fence about that. If all they encounter are these men, they're going to say, "Yeah, I'm not interested. I'm better off on my own," and that's not good for women. So there is a lot that needs to be done, and it starts in the home, and it certainly should be addressed in the church as well.
I thought it was interesting. I mean, even just like the title of the article, basically, who's to blame, men or women? Just really kind of dividing that right away. But one of the graphs, too, that the article showed that I found interesting was the family formation among women by ideology. And it broke up like conservative and liberal women. And it's just kind of interesting to me because people being married, they had it broken up by like conservative and liberals going back to the 1980s. And even now, like the conservative number, which is higher than the liberal women that are married today, is still not as high as it was for liberal women in the 1980s. That was just interesting to see that decrease just across the board with marriage. Now, the having children has increased in the conservative women, since that time. And so interesting to see the split and to see the shift.
In the 70s and 80s, we used to talk about in the pro-life movement that the pro-abortion people were either not having children or they were aborting their children. And so, kind of the conventional thinking was give it enough time and just by mathematics, the pro-life people were going to become the strong majority. And kind of in a Malthusian mistake, Thomas Malthus mistake, it overlooked other forces that were playing on because even the conservative people began to be affected by other forces. And when you become a big student of history, you find, urbanization, industrial revolution, those were like major forces that had profound effect on the social development of society. But I think all of them are greatly overshadowed by the internet. Mm-hmm. In urbanization, where people were moving in and you were surrounded by a lot more people, you had that many more opinions that influenced you. But once you got the internet, you were greatly influenced by thumbs up and all those kinds of things on social media. And that's why I thought it was interesting, Jonathan. I don't know. I always pronounce his name as Jonathan Haidt, but it might be pronounced Jonathan Haidt, Haidt. I've heard it both ways on Talk Things. But he has commented too, kind of backing up what Jeff said, boys are not turning into men. They're just, and I've read a lot of his material. And he's very big on that. And he's not a Christian. He's probably not a conservative, although I've heard him on different conservative podcasts. But that's his observation, and his writings are very influential right now. But I think that when we look at the influences on people, they're not being influenced by the church, and they're not being influenced as strongly by Christian upbringing, which is, I think, a battle cry for the Christian community to start looking at the values that they're holding on to and why those values are predominant.
Well, the next article that we wanted to get to here was about 7 states that could vote on abortion in 2026. Thought this was a good kind of, I guess, a lay of the land, so to speak, with looking ahead to the new year and on some of this legislation.
Yeah, this was actually they haven't changed the title, but they put a kind of a PS on this article, or an update, saying that there's actually an 8th state now. I think it's good to be thinking about as we enter 2026, to be realizing that the end of Roe v. Wade with the Dobbs decision certainly didn't end the debate about abortion, didn't remove any of the urgency to pro-life work. And in fact, what we have seen since then is much more activity on the state level. For the most part, the pro-life side has not been on the winning side of the abortion fights in the various states. And this is pointing out that there are 7, or actually 8 states coming up in 2026 that are going to have votes of some sort on abortion. And won't go into too much detail about all of them, but it's, Missouri, Nevada, Idaho, Nebraska, Oregon, Virginia, and Colorado, that are all going to have some kind of constitutional amendment or referendum or something on the ballot. And this is just a point that you need to pay attention to these things if you live in one of those states. But it's, even if you don't live in one of those states, it's worth paying attention, because it might be your state next. And there are some efforts in some other states where pro-life side has already lost, where they're trying to claw back some things that they'd had before. But it is still something that means that as a Christian citizen who has a right to vote, you should be thinking about how that vote is going to help protect life. Again, not just for you or for your immediate family or whatever, but for the rest of society that you have some responsibility for as a Christian who loves his neighbor.
From the day I got involved with pro-life stuff, church-state issues have been like the persistent bell that keeps ringing. And a lot of Christians will say, well, okay, my faith says that I could never abort a child, so as long as I'm straight on it, what the state does doesn't matter. Well, that's not quite true, because as I've studied it and given more than a few hours thought to it, in a representative form of government, the way the government acts is a reflection of you. And so you use the influence you have as a steward over other people, the responsibility to care for them, despite the mantras that go on out there that it's my body, my choice, keep your hands off my body, all that kind of stuff. Those notions aren't completely valid. I mean, otherwise you would not dart out in the traffic to protect a child that went running out, between vehicles. You would not be sounding the alarm, if someone's life is in danger. Someone's life is in danger. And so Christians have a responsibility. And so it's an opportunity for you to be involved. Does it replace the Christian's responsibility for proclaiming the gospel, pointing to Christ, pointing to God's word? No, that always still takes precedent. But it's not either or. You do have a responsibility and an opportunity in a representative form of government to get your voice heard. And knowing that these states are out there doing it, and Jeff's absolutely right. It's not going on in your state today. Stick around. It's like the weather in Wisconsin. It just changes very quickly. And that's also why we put such strong emphasis on working on faith, working on the Christian witness, because the tide shifts with administrations. The tide shifts with what voices get heard the loudest. But you got to get your voice heard. And in a representative form of government, you can be heard.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. And we did want to hit a topic that Bob had mentioned last time, too. It was using AI to generate with deceased loved ones. We had talked about AI last time. I believe it was the Japanese woman that married her AI. Always interesting topic to look into. But this one, Bob, can you tell us a little bit about what AI is going to be able to do, or what they're trying to get it to do with this deceased loved one?
Okay, so those of you who are listening to this, you're going to want to go into the show notes and click on the link to see how this works. So the link is actually to an X feed, formerly Twitter feed, and it's a commercial really for a company and what they do is the commercial shows that you take grandma and for 3 minutes, you just ask her some questions, you let grandma talk and so forth. And then grandma dies. But
they don't show that in the commercial.
They don't show that in the commercial, no. But the thing is that you've got 3 minutes of clips of grandma, and then AI then programs grandma to be responsive to inquiries. And so you call up grandma on your mobile device or whatever, and you can ask grandma about your pregnancy. You can ask grandma about life. And then as this goes on, the commercial shows it going to. It starts with a woman who interviews her mother, and her mother dies, and then her child talks to grandma still, and then when he grows up, his wife is expecting, and he's still talking to grandma. Okay, now, there have been iterations of this going on for a few years now. With the Holocaust Museum had been playing with these long interviews of Holocaust survivors so that even after they had died, you can kind of call back and ask. They went through many questions and stuff like that. Well, AI has brought it to the next level. And to give you an example, now I have to talk about AI in the courses I teach, so I'm into this. I have a picture of my wife and her 3 sisters. And I just plugged it in. The picture is a static picture taken at a wedding. And I plugged it into my paid AI service I have. And I said, make a video out of this. Just make a 5-minute video. And all of a sudden, or a 5-second video. And all of a sudden, for 5 seconds, all 4 of them are moving incredibly naturally. And they're talking, at just 5 seconds. I forgot to tell it that they were English. So they all have Japanese voices, which I thought was pretty funny. But the point is that this can happen. And it has profound effects on the way we remember people. And this is a little bit of Bobism here. This is a little bit, if you ever notice around my house, I don't have a lot of pictures of family. Now, we record the Life Challenges podcast in my ice cream parlor. I built a 1935 ice cream parlor. Now, in fairness, a lot of the pictures around us, not all of them, but a lot of the pictures are of relatives. They are old pictures of like my great-grandparents that I've never met and so forth, that family had them in their stockpile, and so we hang them in this parlor. But I've always worried about what would happen when people get very sentimental with pictures and then moving pictures. And now you can take it to the next level where you can actually start programming videos that are taken of people who have died and what they did. And I'll tell you one other kind of unusual thing. This is 22 years ago. So let's say you have a church cemetery. And so as an elder member of the congregation, you could shoot a video of me where I tell you what I think of my faith and being a member of this church. And then the idea was that you could take this video and then down the road, your grandchildren, great-grandchildren come and visit the cemetery. You go to a video screen, you push one button and it'll show you where the grave is. Or you push another button, it'll be that's changing slides of pictures of your life like you have at a funeral. The third button you push would be this video coming up of me telling you what my faith means. Okay, it sounded quaint, it sounded kind of nice and everything like that. This is one giant leap forward past that. And I do think we have to wrestle with how much we really like that.
As with so many technological advances or whatever, people just need to ask the question first, what could go wrong here?
Yeah.
And so often they just go forward without ever asking that, or else they say, we'll worry about that later. But just, thinking about this in particular, I mean, what's one of the things that people are criticizing AI for these days, even with just, like asking a question of AI? It's like hallucination. That information starts getting brought in that they're making up, or that they're drawing from someplace that's just inappropriate. This would have to be built with today's technology. So you do the initial recording and you get some information put in there. But what happens, I'll say 15 years down the road, when little Charlie is asking questions of grandma that are about things that grandma never would have had any opinion on? And so suddenly the AI has to manufacture all of this stuff. And what's the basis on which it's going to manufacture that? And you could end up with a grandma that is completely opposite to the real grandma who is no longer, alive. And he has a relationship with not just with a ghost, but with a false ghost. These are the kinds of things that could go wrong. And some of the comments that show up on X there are about how this is going to interrupt the natural process of grieving.
That is exactly what I was thinking of. Yeah. It reminds me too, and I don't think either of you are Harry Potter fans at all, but I would assume that people in our audience have read the books and seen the movies and everything. But in it, spoiler alert, but not really. But Harry Potter's parents have died. In one of the books, he finds this mirror and it shows like his parents in it, and they're moving and everything. And I mean, in the Harry Potter world too, there's moving pictures like that he can see of his parents and everything. Well, when he discovers this mirror, he goes back all the time to just sit and stare at his parents. And finally, he goes back one time, and the headmaster of Hogwarts, of the magical school where Harry goes, has moved the mirror because he just said, you can really lose yourself in this. And so when you guys were talking too about that, that's like kind of what I was thinking of too. And just like what you were saying, Jeff, like with the grieving process, you're just getting so stuck in this false person or this false thing, and I think like as Christians too, I mean, there is something where we do have to kind of, in a sense, like move on after somebody has passed away, and we know that this earth is like not obviously all there is, and just that eternal perspective.
Yeah, just as to illustrate the way that it's supposed to be, the more healthier way that it is. My mother, who I love dearly, passed away 17 and a half years ago. And I have a T-shirt that she gave me, obviously before. And it's really sad for me that it is getting all ratty, and I'm going to have to turn it into a rag pretty soon because I really liked it. But it every time I see it or wear it, it reminds me of her and an aspect of her personality and our relationship, because it's a picture of a bear, and I've been a fan of bears since I was a little boy.
Oh, look, we learned something new about Jeff.
And this bear is like doing some gardening. And he's got this clay pot, and he's putting, doing some plant in it. And the caption on it is Harry Potter. And so that relates to what you were just talking about, but it also is, and that's what put it in my mind. But that's the way it should be. You've got something that brings a really nice memory of the person who has passed, and you connect that way. You're not trying to work with something that is completely manufactured and false.
Yeah, I like what Jeff said. You gotta ask yourself what can go wrong, and just remember this: there's a bias in everything. So if you've got 3-minute interview with grandma, if you're going to start getting into anything that happens outside of that 3-minute interview, the programmer's bias has to play a role. And that bias could be just many, many countless things, very much different than the values grandma held. And I mean, how many times haven't we said, oh, if my grandfather saw this today, he'd be spinning in his grave. We're always talking that way. Well, now all of a sudden you can make your grandfather like anything you want, through AI. And that I am definitely fascinated by the technology of it, without a doubt. But I think it holds great potential to do bad.
Another one we have here is the miracle of forming embryos. Bob, can you explain this one to us?
Well, this brings up my nerdy side in me that all I can see is whenever I start reading articles like this, I see myself at a Bible class I was giving once, and I started going off the deep end in some detail, and I looked down, and my wife is holding her hand horizontally, lowering it, like, bring it back down. You're shooting way too high. Okay, but it was an article that talked about the role of physics and how physics plays a role in the growth of embryos. And in the formation of life, it involves, chemistry, it involves biology, and it involves physics. Physics, when you think of physics, just think gravity. But what it was talking about is how a different texture surface forms or pulls at an embryo. And when I stuck the article in here for consideration, I'm always struck by how mere humans just reach for trying to explain just the incredible. And really, when I was reading this article, I was struck by Psalm 139, fearfully and wonderfully made. And right now what they're feeling is that we've always known about, the role of biology and chemistry in the development of embryonic life. When you add in the dimension of physics and smooth surfaces and rough surfaces and hard surfaces and malleable surfaces and gravity and all that kind of stuff, you start adding that in. It's just a whole new complexity to the creation of life. And it is amazing that you could have billions of people and how it just works. It seems to just keep working. And every once in a while you have something that goes wrong, but really it is incredible. And that's what struck me by it. So those of you who want to be kind of blown away by the different factors that are at work when the sperm reaches the egg and cell division starts to take place, just take a moment. It's not a hard read, it's not a deep read, but it's a fascinating read.
Yeah, one of the things I was struck by in reading this was, just kind of, the history of science, particularly in the modern era. That Darwin came along is like, okay, we're smart scientists here in the 19th century. We figured everything out. We know how this works. Well, they do some more digging. They do some more, find out, oh, no, we didn't have that right at all. But okay, but now we've learned more about this. We understand how things work. And, in more recent, years, it's like, okay, genetics is everything. We figured that out. So once we figure out how the DNA works and how that controls this and that in the cell, whatever, we understand all of this. And now what this is saying, oh yeah, there's this whole area of life and the formation of life and things like that we had no clue about because we were focusing on the chemistry and the biology of it. Well, now we got to look at the physics of it. It's like, oh, there's something more. And that's part of the wonder of good science, is that you're always finding something new. But it's contrast that with the sense of, oh, yeah, we know it all now. We've got it figured out. We're just around the corner from having a unified theory of everything. And it's like, oops, and what this should do is point us toward, as Bob was saying, point us toward the great designer, the creator, God, who actually understands all this stuff and is the one who put it in place. And no, we're never going to be able to get to the point where we can think the same thoughts that he thinks. We can just sit back and think some of them after him, and otherwise just open our mouths wide in awe.
Yeah. There is a tragedy with science, and that is a lot of it sees itself on kind of like a self-pursuit of godship. Like if we keep pushing on this far enough, we're going to be like God. We're going to be able to create life. And there's already, and we've covered it in other stories where people feel that this discovery, pretty soon we don't even need a man and a female. We can create life, in a petri dish and that kind of stuff. something like this kind of reminds you of that, kind of on a related thing, just that the other article that we don't have time to do a full thing on, but there's a field of a study out there called regenerative medicine, which is kind of like salamanders. You cut off a tail of a salamander and it grows back, but it doesn't work that way with people. You cut off a finger, it doesn't grow back. They say at best the tip of a finger might grow back, but it's never quite right. Well, now they think they've found something that will feed into this. I love that kind of research because I think that kind of research fits well with what a Christian should be doing. When you're sick, you help somebody get better. When you've got a disability, you try to help them get through the disability. You don't treat them less because of the illness. You don't treat them less because of the disability, but you try to help them get past it. And when we learn more about the development of life, and we learn how biology works, and then we learn how chemistry works, and now we're learning about how physics comes to play on it. If we turn around and apply that, and those of you looking at careers in biochemistry and so forth, looking at a career, try to get into something that works on healing and works on repairing, and try to avoid things that look at, it's kind of like this Tower of Babel type expedition that we could be like God. We can create life. We can make things better. Because I do think we discover things that allow us to do things that maybe we're not supposed to. But the moment I begin to start thinking like I can be like God, there's a reason that biblical story was preserved for us. And so we got to be mindful of it. So I'm a big fan of regenerative medicine. I think there's a whole avenue of research that can be done there for the common good of people. But I think the moment we step beyond that, we get into trouble.
And that's kind of reflective of what should be a Christian's attitude towards science, which is, okay, God has done something wonderful here. Let's figure out what that is and see how we can work with the pieces, the tools that God has already given us to do something that's good for mankind, for individuals who have some problem, medical issue or whatever, instead of this attitude of, we're going to figure out something new.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We're going to do something God never would have thought of. It's like, okay, well, there might be things in there that are already in our DNA, and that's what this article is about. It's tapping into things that already exist in our DNA and just trying to kind of turn them on, flip the switch in a way that has never done before.
Yeah, we're not anti-science. We love science, but it's got to be channeled.
Well, thank you both for this and for discussing these topics. And we thank all of our listeners, too, for joining us. And be interesting to see all the other current events that the new year brings.
They're piling up.
Yes, but Happy New Year, and we'll see you back next time. Bye.
Thank you for joining us for the Life Challenges podcast from Christian Life Resources. Please consider subscribing to this podcast, giving us a review wherever you access it, and sharing it with friends. We're here to help, so if you have questions on today's topic or other life issues, you can submit them, as well as comments or suggestions for future episodes at lifechallenges.us or email us at podcast@christianliferesources.com. You can find past episodes and other valuable information at lifechallenges.us, so please check it out. For more about our parent organization, please visit christianliferesources.com. May God give you wisdom, love, strength, and peace in Christ for every life challenge.